Šakalienė, Lithuanian defense minister, said Russia is mocking the United States. Lithuania's defense minister, Šakalienė, accused Russia of mocking the US government, as the Kremlin is allegedly not making adequate efforts in view of the new negotiations for a ceasefire. The minister spoke to Euronews this week on the sidelines of a NATO exercise in the Baltic Republic. In my opinion, they have already fooled the American government, showing that they do not respect any effort to reach an agreement, Šakalienė said. Lithuanian defense minister also said, and I quote, "Why should they stop after creating a war economy in Russia?" Šakalienė added that Russia has not been pressured by the United States to make concessions or cease the military campaign against Ukrainian civilians. On the other hand, why should they stop? They have turned their economy into a war economy. End quote. The exercise, dubbed Iron Wolf, included a simulated counteroffensive with German tanks and Lithuanian infantry fighting vehicles. An air assault was then simulated, with paratroopers dropped, as part of the NATO exercise by the United States. Swift response, in which 5 other NATO countries participated: the United States, Germany, Italy, France, and the Netherlands. The purpose of the exercise is to assess the Allied forces in the event of a possible Russian attack on the territory of one of the member countries, and in particular in the Baltic republics. Valid US efforts, but military force is only a deterrent. Šakalienė believes that there is no incentive for Russia to stop its campaign in Ukraine, also because of its imperialistic ambitions in Europe, which according to the minister would be further strengthened by the Kremlin's collaboration with North Korea, Iran, and China. The Russian military industry is really gaining capacity, and in Ukraine they are still advancing. Why should they stop? Stressed the Lithuanian defense chief. The minister answered questions about the first failed attempt at peace talks in Turkey, when Putin refused to show up and sent a delegation, led by presidential assistant Vladimir Medinsky, to meet with his Ukrainian counterpart. As a result, for the second round of negotiations, Zelensky explained to Turkish President Erdogan that he is willing to appear in Istanbul only if Putin also does so. For Šakalienė, the only solution is military deterrence. Šakalienė has called efforts to stop the war valid, but ultimately the only way to end it, in his opinion, is through military deterrence. I think United States efforts to stop the war are helpful. We will see how it ends, but in my opinion, in the end, the only effective means will be the regeneration of the Ukrainian army and the construction of a military force in Europe. This is the only deterrent that Russia understands, the minister reiterated. NATO defense ministers will meet in Brussels next week, when the United Kingdom and Germany convene the Ukraine Defense Contact Group at the headquarters of the Atlantic Alliance. US-China, clash over Taiwan heats up. China's response to the judgments expressed by US Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth at the Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore is very harsh, with negative comments on Beijing's actions in Taiwan and the South China Sea. Hegseth ignored the demands for peace and development of the countries of the region, propagated the mentality of head-on confrontation, typical of the Cold War, defamed and attacked China, and exaggerated the Chinese threat theory, which was full of provocations. This was said by a spokesman for the Chinese Foreign Ministry in a statement. China is strongly dissatisfied and firmly opposed, and has lodged formal protests with the United States. The Taiwan issue is not a bargaining chip. The note then calls on the United States to not play with fire on Taiwan, as it is a purely internal matter of China, and no foreign country has the right to interfere. The United States should not even dream of using the Taiwan issue as a bargaining chip to contain China, and should not play with fire. China urges the US to firmly abide by the One China principle and the 3 joint Sino-American communiques, and to cease supporting Taiwan's independence forces, the statement added. Hegseth's accusations. The threat posed by China is real and could be imminent. This is what Washington has accused China of, namely of preparing to use force in the Asia-Pacific, a region that the US considers a geopolitical priority. Speaking is US Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth at the Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore, in a context of growing geopolitical and economic tensions with Beijing. Hegseth said, Xi Jinping wants to dominate and control the region and is training every day for an invasion of Taiwan, with an increase in Chinese maneuvers around the island. We are here to stay. America is proud to be back in the Indo-Pacific. And we are here to stay, Hegseth said. Which, however, asked the Allies to rapidly increase their defensive capabilities. Citing Europe as an example, it's a bit hard to believe I can say this, but thanks to President Donald Trump, our Asian allies and partners should take an example from European countries. Because deterrence is not cheap. And so, how can it make sense for European countries to do this while key allies and partners in Asia spend much less in the face of a far more formidable threat from Communist China? Let alone North Korea, he argued. The strategic advantage. Ultimately, a strong, resolute and capable network of allies and partners is our main strategic advantage. China envies what we have together, but more investment is needed. American allies in the Indo-Pacific should rapidly strengthen their defenses, he said. Tensions between the US and China have intensified with Trump's return to power and the tariffs and technological restrictions imposed on Beijing. The President of France, Emmanuel Macron, was also present at the forum. He called on his Asian partners to form new alliances so as not to be collateral victims of the decisions taken by the superpowers. And he sent a message to Beijing. If China does not want NATO to be involved in Southeast Asia or Asia, it must clearly prevent North Korea from being involved on European soil, where it has deployed troops against Ukraine alongside Russia. Thank you, and please don't forget to subscribe.